Monsieur Anber.
Monsieur Cassavant, how are you, brother? What happened?
Good evening, and also good evening to a regular contributor to the podcast and a friend who's also in town in Montreal for the preparation of Artur Beterbiev, Mr. Iceman John Scully. Scully, how are you doing this evening?
I'm good. Good to see you guys.
Russ, any
You as well, Scully.
opening statement here or something before we get into the topics of this evening?
No, I think maybe we were just trying to explain to John why we have the Poppy on.
Yeah.
Because we're recording day before Remembrance Day. So for us, Remembrance Day is tomorrow. So I was explaining to him that the famous poem written by, I'm not sure if it was a British or Canadian soldier, John McCrae, who ended up dying. While he was dying, he wrote the poem called "In Flanders Fields Where Poppies Grow," and this was in World War I. And that this is the poppy has become synonymous with remembrance for the soldiers who died in both world wars, and we celebrate that. And on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, you're supposed to observe a minute of silence in remembrance of those who gave their lives, so that we can be here today to talk trash about everybody else. Really?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that was necessarily the purpose of it, but
Probably not.
It's part of the freedoms of free speech that we have, and I don't think we're going to trash anybody this evening. It's not really our style, unless some of the crooked judges or some of the corruption we see in boxing or some of the stupidities. But if not, we try to give everybody a fair shake, and we will, of course, get back to Canelo outcome from this past weekend. We'll talk a little bit also about David Benavidez in action this weekend, and we'll have a Jaime Munguia, Gabriel Rosado matchup to look forward to this upcoming Saturday as well. But we haven't talked much, Russ, about the bout since it happened in our, everyday life. So we're reserving it for the podcast this evening. Canelo Alvarez, in typical Canelo fashion, in his 60th pro fight, kind of walked down and eventually stopped Caleb Plant and becoming the undisputed super middleweight champion in the process, something that has never happened before at 168 pounds. Big win for Canelo. A lot of people were left again mesmerized by being the pound for pound champion, doing kind of what he predicted to do. I believe Iceman John Scully also watched the fight on Saturday night, of course, near your location, or you guys are watching it together, if I caught some of it correctly. So I know we're going to probably have a little bit of disagreements about how the fight concluded, or some of the aspects of the fight, I should say, not the conclusion of it. But first and foremost, Russ, was it better than you expected? About what you expected? What would be the conclusion based on Canelo's win this past Saturday?
In credit to Caleb Plant, I'm going to say it was maybe a little better than I expected. I think Caleb Plant succeeded in neutralizing what Canelo was trying to do. But I think that's a far cry from you neutralize somebody to that makes you winning the rounds, right? Like, I think there's a far cry between the two. I thought he was effective in giving himself every opportunity he could to try and win the fight by neutralizing the atomic bombs that are coming his way. And I think he did that well. Canelo was throwing, despite whether Caleb Plant was blocking them, and he was preventing Canelo from landing the clean, hard money shots, which he landed once in the fight, and that seemed to be sufficient to end it. But he succeeded in doing that. It was still Canelo who I thought was pressing the action, forced the fight, higher punch output, stronger punch output. I saw this as a convincing, dominating performance by Canelo. I think even with people saying, "Oh, Caleb Plant won the first round," and Scully and I discussed this, like that's where I say, nobody won that round. Like nobody, neither Canelo, neither Plant, nobody won the round. You didn't get hit. Neither guy really got punched. So to me, it's not even winning a round, but people scored. Oh, he won that round. And I think one of the things that people do when they have a fighter who's and we've talked about this before, who is as dominant as Canelo, if suddenly he's not battering you from pillar to post, must be losing the round. You know, like they suddenly it's a great achievement for the other guy to prevent himself from being battered. You know that he wins the round. It's like we have to give points. We have to give a lead. We have to handicap the weaker fighter. You know, by saying, well, if you don't beat the heck out of him for 3 minutes of every round, well, then you might not win the round. You know that. And I think that's a little bit unfair. But if you watch it objectively, and I think, Scully, we were in a little bit of a, semi-pizza coma, relaxed, watching it, analyzing it the way we don't watch it. At least I don't watch it as a fan. I'm watching it as a trainer and as a cornerman, and I'm watching it as a guy that loves boxing and understands the science of boxing. And I just saw Canelo controlling it, and I had it virtually a shutout. Forget about the 2 rounds that you might have given Caleb Plant. If you gave them to him, it's because maybe nothing happened, but I virtually had it a shutout. Scully?
Yeah, I think in fights like that, it's misleading. Like if you tell someone, Canelo won every round, it's like, okay, that could very well be, but it doesn't reflect the closeness of some of those rounds.
Agreed.
The guy like Plant was certainly in it. He was in it for a long time, and he had success. So that's why I learned, as a kid, looking at like record books and stuff, and I was like, man, this guy lost, 120 to 108, but I saw the fight and I thought it was a really good fight. And it's like you could lose 12 rounds by a razor thin margin. So the fight is awesome, but it's a shutout. So it's a misleading term. I think Plant's stock went up in a lot of people's eyes. I think they respect him more than they did before the fight, and I'm sure Canelo does. And he should hold his head up high. I thought he fought a pretty good fight, considering he's in with a guy who's calculated and smart and pressure fighter, but he's a combination puncher and he's very, very technical, very, very smart. He was in with an elite guy, and he visually didn't look scared. He didn't look overwhelmed. He looked pretty calm at times. And I don't know if you saw, and I don't know if it's real or not. People tell me it's real. Did you see the video with them talking to each other?
Yes.
Now, is that real?
Yeah, it's legitimate. But what I don't really kind of understand is Caleb's like going into the audio. If you haven't seen it, you can find it on the internet. And he's going, "See, I'm pretty good. I'm better than Caleb." Canelo's just going, yeah, and they're just kind of looking at each other, no punches thrown. And I thought in that sense was kind of, well, if Caleb Plant's able to talk that much, and it seems almost he was not confident, but he was happy to be able to withstand Canelo. Because, why would you be saying that if you really thought you were going to win the fight at a certain point? Or I don't know if you make something different of it, but to me, it would kind of show that at some points in this fight, many rounds of this bout, there wasn't much going on. It was just kind of Canelo chasing, taking his time, and just waiting for that opportunity, similar to what he did against Sergey Kovalev.
This is why I said earlier, and I understand exactly what John said is 100% right. And I wasn't meaning to imply that Caleb wasn't good. What I said was he succeeded greatly in neutralizing Canelo. He succeeded in killing that pace. He succeeded in not offering a stationary target. He succeeded in keeping Canelo honest, that Canelo had to be careful of what he was doing, that he couldn't just, he succeeded in doing that. That's a great achievement. And I think for somebody, and that's why I think at one point where he said in that little audio where he said, not bad for 21-0. He said, I'm not bad for 21-0, and Canelo acknowledged it. And I think that's what he felt, that he was doing really well for somebody that was expected to be blown out of the building, and he was still in there and neutralizing one of the most devastating punchers and stalkers in the game in Canelo. So full credit to Caleb Plant, 100%. But I'm still not happy with what I saw on the judges' scorecards, because to me, they proved they don't know what they're watching. They don't know what they're looking at.
Ice, before you jump in here, is that one of the reasons why, Russ, you tweeted out on Sunday that you couldn't wait to talk about this fight, because the judges had it at the time of the stoppage, respectively, 96-94, 97-93, and 98-92. And I know that many of my friends and boxing colleagues who know, whether it's amateur fighters, pro guys, people who've been in the game, a lot of people were writing me, and you thought also throughout Twitter and other social media, a lot of people thought Plant was winning many of these rounds, especially early on, which you seem, Russ, to see is completely incorrect based on what you just said about the judges, based on what you had it as a shutout. I think you're giving maybe a little bit too much credit to Canelo because even though he was the aggressor, he was barely throwing any punches. So explain to me, is that why you were this excited to talk about it? You want to slam people who had Caleb Plant winning most of the early rounds?
I'm not going to slam anybody. I'm not talking about slamming. I'm just saying.
I thought that's what we're able to do, right? That's why we're able to have our freedoms to trash people.
Listen, I think Patricia Joyce Moore. What's the girl? What's her name?
It's Jarman.
I think that's a horrific scorecard that you have it at 96-94, 2 points difference in this fight. I think the other two, were accurate. I think the 98-92 one was the most accurate. And I think the 2 rounds that were given to Plant were, in my opinion, were more a lack of Canelo's commitment to win the round than Plant winning them. But that's not taking away, again, anything from Plant. I don't want anyone to call in or message me saying, why are you all over Plant? I'm not all over Plant. I'm not in one way disrespecting anything he did in the fight. He like I said, he achieved great things. But when you're scoring the fight, you score the fight. And that's how I saw it, that it was it. And it's been the case. Somebody pointed this out about the people who had Kovalev ahead when Canelo stopped him. Like, I didn't think Kovalev was ahead either. I thought this was a controlled.
Yeah, but does it really matter? It looked like Canelo himself didn't care about throwing some of the early rounds away because his plan ultimately was to get the stoppage.
Okay, but that's not the point. The point is that the judges don't know what they're looking at. They're not seeing the finer aspects of, I shouldn't say the judges. Patricia didn't see what she should be seeing in the subtleties of boxing that make you win a round, that make you the winner of a round. Scully, maybe you can articulate this better than me. I'm not trying to trash anybody, but I'm saying that, you have to be able to see what you're judging and not just write a 10-9 wherever you feel like it.
Right. Well, I'll give an example. There are people who see Floyd Mayweather against the ropes and the opponent throws 15 punches against him. And they say, man, the guy's aggressive. He's letting his hands go and something must have landed. And they're not realizing that Floyd is rolling and shifting and blocking and parrying. And they don't recognize that level of defense. Or on a deeper, someone else could do, like Floyd does it, and people might go, oh, great defense. But somebody else does it who they never heard of does it. And they go, oh, he's getting killed. He's getting outpunched, so you have to take the face off the fighter and it's easier said than done, but you have to take the face off the fighter and just look at him as a human being who's boxing and let's see what he's doing. And, so there's a lot of human interaction there that clouds things sometimes.
No, but I think that argument, could be also used against Canelo, that so many people now know that he's the best pound for pound and he's so great and he's going to win these fights, that people kind of give him maybe more credit for some of the things he's doing. Because Caleb Plant, to me, in the early rounds, a lot of it, he was blocking well, and he was kind of pot-shotting. Nothing that was damaging Canelo, but I thought if this guy's not named Canelo and he's just named Joe Blow, his aggression would not be rewarded the same way because it's supposed to be effective, clean punching. That's the first criteria, and he wasn't doing much of that at all in the first few rounds.
I disagree because I think he was very effective in moving the guy back. I think he was very effective in keeping Caleb Plant in a defensive shell. I think he was very effective in taking him to the ropes. Now, he might not have been landing those big, clean, hard shots because Caleb was catching them on the glove, catching it, rolling away from it. But he was throwing it with bad intentions, and he was putting Caleb Plant where he wanted to put him. That is effective aggression.
All right, fair enough. And here's the other thing about Canelo. Let's look at his fights, his last 2 fights. This fight this past weekend against Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, Avni Yildirim, Callum Smith, Kovalev, Danny Jacobs, Rocky Fielding. None of these wins since the rematch against Golovkin have been particularly entertaining. There's been entertaining finishes, but there's never been a moment in any of those bouts where you really felt like the opponent was going to be a threat to hurt or stop or win against Canelo. So to me, it also shows his dominance, but this past weekend, Canelo is also, I think, in a sense, he's due for a fight that you can really have that drama and feel, because right now it's mostly been one-sided and it's not always been entertaining from start to finish for his bouts.
I'll let Scully answer first.
Well, it's funny, like hearing that scenario painted and talking about it, it sounds like we're talking about Mayweather. Like the way they used to talk about Floyd. It's the same thing. Like, and then when it's almost like one day people woke up and they go, this guy's really good. Like this guy, like above all else, all that other stuff we were saying, wow, this guy's actually pretty good. And, you have one performance and it's like, oh, it was boring. And then you do it 2-3 times. It's like, well, he's pretty good, but it's boring. And then after the 5th time, you're like, man, these guys can't even win around. Like these guys can't even handle them. So I guess it takes time to marinate. It takes time to really see. And I was guilty of it to a certain degree as with Mayweather. Like there was like 4. I said at one point, I go, you don't even have to watch Mayweather fight because every fight is exactly the same. Like it's 12 rounds of identical boxing. But then I thought about it, I say, but he's winning like all 12 rounds against everybody, Yeah. So I was one who took a little time, but I appreciated Mayweather. Now obviously it's very clear to me, even though he still has a lot of haters, which is crazy. But and I think Canelo's in that same boat. And above all else, Canelo's really good. Like this guy's awesome. he really is good.
But I had the sense, though, Scully, watching this fight, Russ, and I'll let you jump in here in a sec, that I look forward to his next opponent. He said he's going to take a break. He's been super active, especially for a pound for pound, and the type of money he has and brings, he could be taking a lot less fights. Now it looks like he's going to rest a little bit. He says he probably won't fight till Cinco de Mayo. And I'll give you who I think after watching this past fight against Caleb Plant, who stock went up of possibly defeating Canelo. But what did you want to say, though, Russ, here, based off what Scully was saying about Mayweather and Canelo?
In the past, and we'll keep this between us, but in the past, I have been somewhat critical of Triple G. Yes. And after seeing, not overly, but, a little critical, but after speaking with Abel last week, while we gave John the week off, and seeing the performance by Canelo this weekend, and looking back at the fighters that Canelo has fought over the last little while, and then hearing them again by what you just said, Gennady Golovkin gave him 2 hella fights. He gave him 2 great fights, better than all those other guys combined. Yeah, like he hit him, he got hit, he came forward, he went backwards. Triple G's stock, based on what Canelo has done, has gone up in my eyes. Now that might be, but he's proven that Triple G was a genuine threat to the Canelo legacy. But Canelo proved just how great he is as the same way Ali had to go through war to beat Joe Frazier. There's certain guys, you beat them by a hair. It's not like you got demolished you beat them, but you still got the W, and that made you great. So Canelo got the W, but it was by a hair against Golovkin. And for him to do that proves just how great he is, because Golovkin proved that he's for real.
And I think the Golovkin fight is probably where we're headed next, based on Canelo's comments. After the fight, it was the first time Canelo kind of acknowledged that he'd be open to facing Golovkin a 3rd time, provided Golovkin defeats Riyado Murata in December in Japan, which is a tough fight for Golovkin, but one that he's going to be favored for. And Golovkin being 39 years old, and Canelo, the last time they faced, it would be a perfect test progression of Canelo being bigger now, more confident, greater defensive skills that he's displayed the last few fights compared to the rematch against Triple G. it's probably a fight that makes a lot of sense. And to me, is also a fight that now Canelo would be a big time favorite for, and would probably be a much easier, maybe not much, I don't want to use that word, but it'd be an easier task to me on paper than Canelo fighting your guy, Iceman Russ, Artur Beterbiev, because I saw Canelo against Caleb Plant, this past weekend, and the size difference to me against Artur would be massive, and it would be by far the most difficult challenge for Canelo to face right now in boxing.
Scully?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big things. Like when he fought Triple G, and I remember at the weigh-in seeing the face-to-face picture, and I was like, man, look how small he looks next to Triple G. Now, I've met Triple G. He's not a big guy by any stretch. So right. Canelo next to Artur would be like a dwarf. You know, he would be outsized considerably, especially when Artur, you know, after the weigh-in puts the weight on. And Artur's already a superhuman physical specimen of strength. So I personally wouldn't even, you know, people say, like, people are like to call a fight, like, oh, he ducked this guy, he ducked that guy. I mean, if he doesn't fight Artur, it's not a duck because he's not even in the same weight class. But if he doesn't fight him, I don't blame him at all. Like, there's no reason for him to have to go up another weight class back to light heavy and fight, you know, Godzilla, you know, a superhuman strength, just monster. So I wouldn't even blame Canelo for not fighting Artur.
And I'm going to take the other side of the argument on that, in that I think the size difference that you're both speaking about, I think plays into Canelo's strengths more than it does to Artur. I'd rather have Artur up there against a bigger guy, a bigger target that he can hit. Yo, if we can touch you, I'm happy.
Yeah.
You know, I'd be happy.
What happened though? Did you see? I was stunned at how Caleb Plant near the ropes in the shoulder defense, Canelo still preferred staying at mid-range. He never locked his head or tried to get into the chest of Plant and dig into the body or go. Like, he likes being mid-range and just upper body and try to counter. He even gives himself a little bit in the knockdown. He pushes Caleb Plant off to give him a little bit more space, which was smart in this case. But if Artur just steamrolls him and tries to fight more, like, Canelo doesn't seem to me want to be toe-to-toe like a lot of traditionally other Mexican fighters have in the past. Like, he seems to be happier with the mid-range distance. And I think if Artur just steamrolls him, like, Canelo's not going to be sure exactly what to do.
Don't misconstrue being on the inside or being at mid-range to wanting to go toe-to-toe. I think Canelo likes to stand right where he thinks the opponent can hit him. I think he likes to use his defensive skill and fire away from there. He make you miss and fire away, sitting right in the pocket, like old school style stuff. He doesn't mean he has to be an infighter right on your chest, but I think he likes that three-quarter range, you know, where he'll walk you down, but he still gives himself the distance to punch. And I think what was evident in the fighter that made me realize that the most, when I think about it, always comes to mind, was Ray Leonard. When Ray Leonard moved up in weight, you know, like, he was so good, he wasn't getting hit anyway. So size wasn't really a factor with the opponents because it wasn't a fight of physicality with them. He was so quick that he made the other guys look slow. He made Hagler look slow. When he went and moved up and fought Donnie Lalonde, he made him look slow. As soon as he came back down to face Terry Norris, I know this was, you know, at the end of his career, and Camacho, when he was the slow one. Like, they went back to the speed, and that was too much for him. John, am I onto something there? Or?
Oh, 100%. And I was, you know, on that note, when he went back down to fight Norris, if you remember, he went to 54 all the way down, you know, which was stupid. You know, it was a foolish move. And now with Chad Dawson and Chris Bird and different guys having done the similar thing, and De La Hoya, people realize, like, hopefully nobody going forward is going to, after the age of 30, is going to go back down and weight to a weight they haven't been at in several years. Hopefully that never happens again, because the blueprint of failure has been laid out for all of us to see. 100%.
In neon lights.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
anything else before I move on here to Benavidez, who could be another name that a lot of people would like to see Canelo face off against, who will be in action this Saturday. Anything else from this fight, from Canelo? Anything that you feel like I've an oversight on my part, or anything you feel like should be discussed here before we move on?
Well, we didn't really cover what we thought about the judges, and what I thought about the judges, but I just thought that I think one of the things we said was that they have to become more accountable for their scorecards. There has to be a grading of their performance. They have to be able to justify what it is that they're seeing that made them score that. And that will tell you how they're looking at the fights, what they're seeing. And I think that commissions need to really knuckle down on that and not just give anybody, the 12 papers to score the round and say, okay, score it as you see it, effective aggression, the punching, defense, that's the criteria. What does it mean? Has anyone defined that? They need to know. I want to know what their definition of that is. Because to me, and if you remember correctly, wasn't it in the Mayweather fight that somebody scored the fight for Canelo?
A draw. Somebody actually scored a draw.
Right? Like these things shouldn't happen, bro. There's a reason why they're happening.
Yes, but Russ, the time of the draw, there was an absolute joke from, I believe it was CJ Ross at the time. Yeah. I'll confirm the scorecard from who it was, right. But scored a fight that Mayweather pretty much won every single round. Everybody agreed with that. But now the Caleb Plant fight this weekend, you're making it seem as if the judges were the only three who thought Caleb Plant won rounds. Did you not see Ice? You must have heard this also from the boxing community. There was a lot of people who thought Caleb Plant won some rounds against this fight and were agreeing with the judges. It wasn't just yahoos who don't know boxing, Russ, although maybe you will disagree, but there was a lot of people that I know boxing who thought Caleb Plant won rounds.
Okay, who?
Fighters. I don't know if they want me. I don't know if they want me to expose them like publicly, but with some pro guys from Montreal. Let me put it that way.
Well, let's put it this way. Where we were sat watching the fight, we were 5 people, right, Scully?
Yeah. And
the one guy who thought, oh, Plant is winning, he's doing great, was the guy that brought the pizza. He's the guy who made the pizza is the guy who thought Caleb Plant was winning. And when he said that, all of the rest of us who are all former fighters, trainers, they're all former, different level amateurs, Scully, bro, looked at him and said, what are you talking about? Are you crazy? So I don't know. Like, I want to know who.
Well, those same people said the same thing when you had Bradley a draw against Pacquiao in the first fight, Russ. Don't forget that.
Okay, but you know what? True. But you and I both know when we left that venue, that was fine. Nobody said I was crazy. No one said I was crazy. We drove 12 miles, and in that 12 miles, the world changed because HBO said that's a disaster. He won every round. It wasn't. It wasn't. Yeah. And you saw it. You know that.
I know. I'm just kidding.
But anyways, listen, Caleb Plant, I thought, despite losing, proved more in this fight than he had in his previous fights.
Any of his wins.
In any of his wins. He proved that he was a world-class guy. He sought out, and you have to do it. Like what he did, in order to be successful, you have to at least neutralize the strengths of your opponent. You can't let your opponent use all his strengths and still hope to win. So he succeeded in neutralizing that for 10 and a half rounds. He was able to do that, or 10 rounds. And credit to him, because I don't think anybody has been able to do that as successfully as he did in what, like Scully said, was a competitive fight. It wasn't, when I say he won every round, doesn't mean he battered him from pillar to post. He won the rounds, I thought, but it was very competitive. And the reason it was competitive was because Caleb Plant was able to neutralize Canelo's strength. So full credit to him. And I thought it was a great fight and lived up, as far as I'm concerned, beyond expectation.
All right. And Scully, final thoughts on the bout. I want to get your take on, does it matter to you that Canelo is the undisputed champion? Because I know how you feel about titles and the title sanctioning bodies. He has all 4 belts, and a lot of the media coverage was about that fact that he's undisputed. Do you think that matters much, or it matters more about the type of opponents he's defeated and the fact that he's one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the last 30 years or so?
Well, listen, everybody's excited. They were, undisputed champion. Don't worry. The sanctioning bodies are going to divide those titles up before we know it. Don't even worry about it. It's already a done deal. Don't worry about it. He'll be getting stripped momentarily for not fighting some guy from Lithuania that we never heard of, that's only ranked by one sanctioning body. And so, yeah, his reign will be short and sweet.
All right. One name that a lot of people think could be a good challenge for Canelo down the road is David Benavidez, who's in action this upcoming Saturday. He's fighting Kyron Davis as a sub-in for the disappointing PED, another fighter who got caught with PEDs in Jose Huscategui a few weeks ago.
Huscategui.
You think that's the proper pronunciation? All right. I'll delegate to you, Russ. So, so now Benavidez is kind of in his wait mode. He's been having good fights, good wins, waiting on a big-time fight, big-time opportunity. He's certainly one of the most exciting punchers or volume punchers in that weight class for sure. I mean, I think he'll win this fight rather easily. Anything else from Benavidez in terms of a possible opponent for Canelo? Do you think he's a legitimate threat against Canelo?
I think is he a legitimate threat? I think he goes into it as a serious underdog, but I think it's a fight that draws massive interest. I think David Benavidez has proven to be a quality fighter, throws a lot of punches. He's been around. He's got a good reputation. He's a good puncher, volume puncher. I think it's a hell of a fight, but I think, you have to favor the guy who is the undisputed champion of the world in the face of boxing. And that's no disrespect to Benavidez, but, you're going to have to do something to prove that you deserve to be the favorite going into that fight.
I agree. I mean, you couldn't have said it any better. That's, I think let me say, Benavidez is very good, and he's going to talk a good game, and it's, it's going to be exciting and all those things. But, Canelo's Canelo. He's turning in a certain way of thinking. He's the Floyd of his generation right now. Like he's
with
all
power.
These, power. But these guys are good. It's like, but can he beat Canelo? I don't know. Like I always said about Floyd Mayweather, the welterweight division would have been awesome if he wasn't around. If he wasn't there and it was just Bradley and Devin Alexander and Sean and all these guys fighting each other and they weren't all waiting for Floyd, there would have been some great fights. But he took that away to a certain degree because everybody wanted to wait to get the fight with him, Berto and all these guys. Now it's a similar thing with Canelo. It's like we have all these, good guys in that weight. Durrell looked good the other night, but now it's like, well, they're all good, but I don't think any of them are going to beat Canelo at his best. So, it's kind of like the best of the rest.
Yeah, and the undisputed thing is just proves how even the purists in boxing want one champion. And they love the fact that, Canelo's the one champion. Be like having one, like what used to be one belt, despite there being four belts where everyone can carry their trophies around and have as many trophies as they can, everyone wants to see who's the one champion is and who's the best. And look at the big deal they're making about it for him becoming undisputed champion.
Right.
All right. And then I want to have a quick word about Gabriel Rosado, who seems to be a boxing lifer against Jaime Munguia this upcoming Saturday. I think it's a very intriguing bout. Munguia was somebody that a few years ago people thought maybe if he stayed with Canelo in the same weight class could be a challenge to Canelo. That doesn't seem like it's anywhere near the plans at this time, point in time. But he's definitely a volume puncher, more of that traditional Mexican style. Even though I know, Russ, you're not a big fan of that saying. Rosado to me is kind of crazy. About 7 years ago, he got knocked out by David Lemieux, and I thought Rosado was done then. And now he seems to be able to still continue and put up a big upset win in his last fight. do you think he can have, does he have a chance to pull an upset against Munguia, although going back down now to 160 pounds?
I love Rosado. And I was just about to say, while you were talking, I would say, he likely might be the best fighter with a record like that in boxing. Like his record, when you talk about how records are, you'd look at that and say, all right, there's an easy win for our guy. Let's match him with this guy, right? But he doesn't. His record is bloody hell deceiving, as to what fight you're going to be in, what hell you're going to have to go through to put another L in his column, to do that. And, he's whatever he lacks in skill, he certainly makes up for in heart and determination. And he's got no quit in him whatsoever. And yeah, is Munguia going to be the favorite? Sure. But if Munguia doesn't take this fight seriously and realize that he's in with a real guy that's going to be there when the ref said round 7, round 8, round 9, and Gabriel Rosado keeps coming out, that's he could be in for a long night. But Gabe is one of those reasons, and someone sent me this on Twitter about how boxing is the entertainment business, and that's why it's about people putting asses in seats. And I didn't want to get into a whole beef on Twitter because it's impossible to explain everything.
Prize fighting to an extent. That's what it's about. Yeah.
Yeah. But people saying, well, more people would rather see Gabe Rosado fight than see Demetrius Andrade fight. Well, but Demetrius Andrade is a really good fighter. He's really skilled. He's great. But sometimes you don't see that because you, as a fan, want to just see a slugfest and two guys bleed as much as possible, which is why MMA, I think, has gained the popularity that it's gained, because it's very difficult to be a spoiler in MMA. It's very difficult to be a negative type fighter. It's very difficult to just be a defensive wizard and not do anything and just pop and move and be a Guillermo Rigondeaux in MMA. You're gonna end up someone's gonna grab you by the head and start beating on you. It's gonna happen sometime in the fight. But boxing, that you can still get away with, and the casual fan doesn't want to see that. When he wants to see knock down, drag him out, slugfest where guys are being battered from pillar to post, whereas us as trainers are sitting there going, what the heck are you doing? Don't do that. Don't do it. Why are you standing there with him? How many times, Scully, have you heard a fighter comes back to the course and said, why are you standing there with him? Box this guy, right?
They told me that plenty of times.
Yeah. So,
with the MMA, they're not going to have guys who are spoilers and runners and things like that, even if they're awesomely skilled. You know what I mean? Like, you couldn't have Harold Graham in MMA. You know what I mean? You got, like, even the guys that are 4 and 5, if they fight a guy 20-0, for as long as it lasts, it's going to be a war, because they don't seem to know that they're opponents and that they're supposed to lose. Some guys in boxing know their role. They know their style. They know that they'll get asked to come back. Where this Dana White, love him or not, he's telling you, listen, if we're not really excited to watch you, then I don't even want to see you again. Like, don't even call me, and he rules with an iron fist, but I can't say it's the worst formula ever to come out.
Yeah, but it is a monopoly. He can say that because it's a monopoly.
Not a monopoly. Yeah. It's not like 4 other organizations alone in North America and around the world. Now he has the stranglehold of it, but I mean, in fairness, you're not the biggest MMA expert to begin with, Russ, and I think you never tried to pretend otherwise. And Dana White, since the subject came up, I don't know if you've seen this, but he was watching the Canelo fight, ringside, cage side, and he was putting on a big UFC pay-per-view this past weekend in New York City, headlined by Usman against Covington in a rematch fight. But this was before the main event, and he was watching the Canelo bout, and he bet $100,000 on Canelo to win by knockout. And he has an appreciation for boxing. And last thought maybe on this is that I don't know if you saw the comments that Kamaru Usman was the welterweight champion in UFC. and has been dominating his opponents. And the welterweight limit in the UFC is 170 pounds. He said he liked to fight Canelo in a boxing match. And Dana White, after the fight, said, I watched Canelo tonight. Usman doesn't want to fight Canelo. Trust me. That was good to even Dana shutting down a little bit that theory. But do you have any thoughts on it? Because I don't know if any of you gentlemen have even seen Kamaru Usman fight in MMA.
It doesn't matter. I have not. But all I can think of is Canelo's famous words of payday. You want payday. And that's right. And listen, when Floyd was king, every welterweight, or actually everybody from lightweight to junior middleweight who had a win said, I want to fight Floyd. Bring me Mayweather. I want to fight Floyd. Well, of course you do. Why wouldn't you? That's where you're going to get the most money. Of course you do.
Yeah. All right, then. Russ, any final thoughts on this evening as we wind up another exciting edition of the Colin Russ Anber Show?
No, this is good. We have a very big week to look forward to next week. So I'm going to be off to Manchester, New Hampshire, first for the Demetrius Andrade Quigley fight and Jessica Camara against Callie Reese fight. And then right away, as soon as that fight's done, I've got the first flight out to Vegas, where I'll be in Janet Beck's corner on the Sean Porter undercard. So I'm looking forward to that. We'll probably talk about it before the fight happens, and we'll preview that, but I'm certainly looking forward to that.
Nice.
I'm excited. I just want to mention Sean Porter's fight. I know we're going to talk about, you guys will talk about in the future. If I'm here.
Talk about it now, Ice, because I know you're Sean.
I mean, I love Sean as a person. And I told him last time I saw him, he was in Connecticut doing some stuff, and I helped train him a little bit. And I said, one thing I admire about you, and I wish I did more of in my own career, was you always bring it. No matter how you felt, like you always brought it. You always bring it. Like, when Sean Porter fights, he may feel terrible. He may not even be in top shape. Who knows? But you'd never know it by watching him fight, because he reminds me of Pazienza to a certain degree. He always, no matter who he fights, they're going to have to fight for their life to get the win over him. And so Crawford, everybody's quick to say, like, instantly, like, oh, I got Crawford, like, no doubt about it, And I don't mind people betting on Crawford, but Crawford's going to have his problems. I guess this is not a simple fight, mentally, psychologically, physically, emotionally. It's not a simple fight. Sean's there to win, and I'm excited to see him fight, win, lose, or draw.
You know what? This reminded me of something, and Crawford could, for all intent and purposes, let's say, win every round. And every round could be a life and death round. And the first time I experienced this was I believe it was in 1982. I was working the corner of Ralph Hollett. He was fighting a Canadian middleweight champion. He was fighting Gary Coates of Philadelphia. Gary Coates of Philadelphia had a mediocre record, club fighter, ordinary guy. This fight should have been like a fight of the year candidate in how many times each guy got hurt in every round. Bang, smash, bang. Like they just went and at the end, it was like 100-90 for Ralph Hollett. He won every round, but it was life and death. It was one of those crazy fights that despite, and I think Sean Porter is that kind of guy. When he is not an easy out, boy. You win, you are in a war for your life, and you leave a piece of your soul in the ring getting that win against Sean Porter.
Yeah,
no doubt about it. And Ice, we'll be able to see you also possibly in the gym. Russ, I don't know if you know this, but Ice, you were there. Ice came by the gym, and I was fortunate enough that he held pads for me for a few rounds, and I got my ass beaten by pads. Just I couldn't block a single counter jab from Ice from the past. So I said, you know what? It's a good thing I'm still doing this behind the mic and I'm not getting in the ring because I'll probably get my ass handed to me at this stage.
So is this because of Scully's pads or your lack of ability?
I think it's a combination. Probably.
Let me say this. my accuracy percentage was really high.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you so much, Ice, again for doing this. Russ, enjoy the trip and a big fight week next week. We'll touch base before that, and a lot of big storylines before we get to the end of the year. Of course, it seems like there's a lot of great boxing in the weeks to come.
Well, we definitely should look at next week doing it from when I'll be in Manchester.
100%, 100%. All right, everyone. So,
all right, fellas.
All right,
Good
guys.
job.
See ya. All right.
Beep,
See you next time. Beep, beep.